What if I told you that most of your decisions, the way you react to your boss, your partner, even a stranger cutting you off in traffic, aren't really yours at all? They're hijacked by emotions you don't even understand. Think about it. How many opportunities have you lost? How many relationships have you damaged simply because you couldn't control one fleeting feeling? The truth is, until you master your emotions will master you. And that's exactly what this book uncovers. The hidden system running your life and how to finally take back control.
Hello, everyone. Hi, all, and welcome to BookPodCastZone. I'm Emma.
And I'm John.
Glad to be diving into this one. It feels incredibly relevant.
It really does. We are diving deep today into the source material from Emotional Mastery, a chapter-by-chapter journey. And our mission, well, it's pretty straightforward, actually.
Yeah, we want to give you, the listener, a clear, actionable roadmap. We're talking about understanding the levers, both psychological and physiological, that, govern your emotional life.
Exactly. It's about moving from just reacting to, well, being proactively in control, taking the reins back.
And this deep dive couldn't be more timely. The modern challenge, especially thinking about 2025 and how digitally overloaded we all are.
Oh, definitely. The constant pings, the endless scrolling.
Right. It acts like this continuous low-grade stressor. It's not just noise in the background. Our sources suggest this constant hum actually amplifies negative emotions.
That drains your energy, right?
Yeah.
It blocks your potential for growth, for focus, for pretty much anything good.
Absolutely. It saps you. So the core goal here from the book and for our discussion is reaching what you might call an emotional turning point.
A turning point. How so?
It's the realization that your feelings aren't these random destructive forces you just have to endure. They're actually manageable. They can even be allies, believe it or not.
Manageable allies. I like that. So we're distilling the basics, understanding emotions, their role in survival, even growth, but really focusing on putting it into practice.
Precisely. This isn't about just passively reading theory. We're aiming to give you the tools straight from the source material to shift from being reactive.
Like getting instantly furious in traffic.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Shifting from that to being proactively in control, knowing what's happening and choosing your response.
So we're looking beyond just the why to the how.
Yeah.
The practical mechanics.
Yes. We'll explore how you can start weaving these lessons into your daily routines. Things like tracking your progress, maybe in a journal, maybe a dedicated workbook the book mentions.
So you can see the patterns, see what works.
Yeah, to systematically build that consistent emotional strength. And the logical place to start, according to the book, is way back, looking at the oldest software running the show, our own basic wiring.
Okay, let's dig into that foundation. The source material really hammers this home. Our quickest gut emotional reactions, they're driven by seriously ancient software.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Our brain, particularly the limbic system, the amygdala, it's still fundamentally wired for, immediate physical survival out on the savannah.
Not for navigating a passive-aggressive email from accounting.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It hasn't really caught up to the nuances of modern stressors. And a key concept here is the threat bias.
Threat bias. Okay, break that down.
Well, it's pure evolutionary psychology. Think about our ancestors. The ones who were hyper-attuned to potential threats that rustle in the bushes, a weird shadow. Those were the ones who survived long enough to pass on their genes.
So being jumpy and negative actually kept you alive.
In a very real sense, yes. Our brains evolved to prioritize negative input. Danger was more critical to notice than opportunity for immediate survival. And that mechanism, it's still fully operational today.
Which explains why when we're already stressed, maybe financially or with all the political stuff going on, it feels so much harder to just shake off negativity.
Exactly. The system is designed to amplify the bad news, to keep you on high alert. It doesn't easily distinguish between a genuine physical threat and, say, a looming deadline.
Which leads to these outsized responses to relatively minor things. The book uses a great U.S. example. That soul-crushing, bumper-to-bumper traffic you find in cities like L.A. or Atlanta.
Oh, yeah. You're stuck. You're going to be late for an important meeting. Now, logically, rationally, being 5, even 10 minutes late, it's usually not the end of the world.
Right. Annoying, yes. Catastrophic, probably not.
But to your ancient brain, that traffic, it's a barrier to your goal. It might feel like a loss of control, maybe even a threat to your status if your boss gets angry. All of that can trigger the full-blown fight or flight response.
So suddenly you're flooded with adrenaline, cortisol.
A whole cocktail. And that immediate, overwhelming negativity, the classic road rage, maybe you're yelling inside the car, heart pounding it, isn't really proportional to the actual delay, is it?
Not at all.
It's proportional to your body's deep instinctual perception of a fundamental threat. It's like your amygdala is mistranslating that slow minivan in front of you as, I don't know, a saber-toothed tiger blocking your escape.
Wow. So the real turning point the book talks about is recognizing that feeling for what it is.
Precisely. It's that moment of awareness. Okay, this intense anger. It's not me. It's my outdated survival programming going haywire. That recognition is the first step towards not being controlled by it.
It's realizing I'm not necessarily an angry person. I'm just running software that needs an update. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag22. What is the ego? Okay, so if that fight or flight is the hardwired ancient defense system, let's talk about the defense we build ourselves, the psychological one. The ego. How does the source define that?
The book describes the ego as essentially a self-made shield. It's the story we construct about who we are, that sense of I, me, mine, my identity, my beliefs, my status.
A shield to protect us, presumably.
That's the intention, yes, to protect us from feeling vulnerable, from hurt, from criticism. But here's the crucial emotional pivot the book highlights. Very often, that shield we build ends up causing more pain than it prevents.
How does that work? Seems counterintuitive.
Because the ego builds these rigid identity structures. Think about common ones. I must be seen as successful. I have to be the smartest person in this meeting. Or I am always right. Admitting fault is weakness.
Okay, I can see how those could be fragile.
Extremely. So when reality inevitably challenges those rigid structures, maybe you don't get the promotion, someone does know more than you are proven wrong, the ego doesn't just gently adjust its story.
No. What does it do?
It often reacts violently. Defensiveness flares up instantly. You might project blame onto others. You might feel intense fear or shame because the core story feels threatened, the shield cracks, and the ego panics.
And this gets fueled constantly by modern life, especially comparison culture. The book mentions this, right?
Absolutely. Think about the pressure, particularly in the US, maybe among young professionals. You're scrolling through LinkedIn, seeing perfectly curated career paths, or Instagram with its idealized lifestyles.
Yeah, it's hard to avoid.
The ego sees that someone else's highlight reel and immediately perceives it as a threat to its own status. The internal narrative screams, "Danger! You're falling behind. You're inadequate."
So potential inspiration just turns into self-inflicted pain, anxiety, jealousy.
Deep-seated jealousy, exactly. Because the ego needs that external validation, that sense of status, to maintain its rigid, protective story. Comparison becomes a constant source of suffering when filtered through an insecure ego.
This is where mindfulness comes in then. The book connects it here.
Yes, it's a powerful countermeasure. Mindfulness practices, at their core, teach you detachment from that constant, often critical, internal narrative driven by the ego.
So you learn to just watch the thoughts.
You learn to observe them, yes. You see the thought, wow, I really messed that up, I'm such a failure, arise, but you don't automatically identify with it, you don't fuse with it.
You see it more like a passing cloud.
Exactly like that. A transient mental event, a weather pattern, not the permanent climate of your being. It's a subtle but profound shift. It's like saying to yourself, okay, I have an ego, I hear its complaints and fears, but I am not my ego. You create space.
Recognizing the storyteller isn't the whole story. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag3. The nature of emotions.
All right, so we've got the ancient survival wiring and this protective, sometimes problematic ego structure. Now, what are the actual feelings themselves? The sadness, the joy, the anger flowing through us?
What's the core idea here from the book? How should we think about them?
The fundamental message is simple, but really transformative. Feelings are primarily signals. They're information. They are not your enemies. The big shift is moving from instinctively opposing or suppressing them to trying to understand them.
Signals, like data.
Exactly. Data about your internal state or your relationship to the external world. The book highlights two key characteristics you need to grasp. First, emotions are temporary. They are passing states.
They don't last forever, even though it feels like they will sometimes.
Precisely. They arise, they peak, they subside like waves. Second, and this is critical, they are interpretive. The raw sensation is one thing, but the label and meaning we attach, this feeling is anger, this feeling is unbearable, is an interpretation.
So they're like news headlines. They convey information, maybe urgent information, but they aren't the whole permanent truth of your reality.
That's a great analogy. They are movement, flux, not permanent monuments carved in stone. However, and this is a big however,
Oh, it's a complication.
our cultural context often messes this up. It pushes us to treat certain emotions, especially negative ones, as permanent character flaws or signs of weakness.
You mean like historical American ideas, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, emotional stoicism being seen as a virtue.
Exactly that. There's often been this deep-seated cultural belief, maybe less overt now but still lingering, that showing vulnerability or even just experiencing strong negative emotions like sadness or fear is somehow a failure, a lack of willpower.
And that cultural programming makes dealing with our actual feelings way more complicated today, doesn't it?
Profoundly complicates things. Think about it. If sadness is culturally framed as unacceptable or weak, then when you inevitably do feel sad,
You don't just feel sad.
right, you immediately layer on secondary suffering, shame about feeling sad, guilt for not being strong enough, anxiety that others will judge you. You pile judgment on top of the original feeling.
Making it so much heavier.
So much heavier. But if you can shift perspective based on the book's approach and accept the initial sadness simply as a signal, a wave of data passing through,
Then you don't add all that extra baggage.
you allow the signal to deliver its message, run its course without the judgment. You become free to decipher what it might be telling you. Maybe you need rest, maybe you need connection, maybe something needs to change. You relate to it differently.
Understanding them as transient signals, not permanent flaws, that really is the first step toward mastery.
It truly is. And now that we have that foundation, let's explore some of the more tangible dials we can actually turn the physical and environmental factors that directly influence these signals.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Okay, part 2. We're moving into the physical levers now, the things we can tangibly adjust. And the book starts with a really fundamental one. Sleep.
Yeah, this is huge. And the turning point here, the shift in understanding, is recognizing that poor sleep isn't just an inconvenience that makes you groggy. It's often a primary root cause of negativity spirals.
It's not just feeling tired, it actually changes your emotional capacity.
Absolutely. The restorative effects of quality sleep, particularly deep sleep and REM sleep, on the brain's ability to regulate mood are just impossible to overstate.
How does that work biologically?
Well, during quality sleep, your brain does essential maintenance. One key area is the prefrontal cortex. Think of it as the brain's CEO. It handles logic, decision-making, impulse control, and emotional regulation. Sleep restores its function.
And without that restoration.
Your emotional fuse gets incredibly short. The amygdala, that threat detector we talked about, becomes hyperactive. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex, which should step in and say, hey, calm down, it's not that big a deal, is offline, or at least sluggish.
So you become much more reactive, less able to handle
Dramatically more reactive. And it directly inhibits your ability to use the very reframing techniques the book talks about later. You can know you should reframe a negative thought, but if you're sleep deprived, you often lack the cognitive resources to actually do it effectively.
That makes sense. And thinking about the 2025 context, sleep tech is everywhere now, isn't it? Smartwatches, rings, under-mattress sensors.
Exactly. And while you don't need the tech, it does provide objective data that reinforces the connection. People can literally see the correlation. Wow, my deep sleep score was terrible last night, and look, my reported stress levels today are through the roof. Or they see low heart rate variability, HRV, after poor sleep, which directly links to reduced resilience.
It makes the invisible visible.
Precisely. And we see this effect on a mass scale. The book could point to the perfect U.S. example, daylight saving time in the spring.
Ah, the dreaded spring forward, losing that 1 hour.
That single hour. Research consistently shows that in the days following that shift, there's a measurable nationwide dip in collective emotional resilience. You see increases in workplace accidents, lower productivity, more reports of irritability, even spikes in things like heart attacks, sadly.
All from just 1 hour of lost sleep, collectively.
It demonstrates powerfully how even small changes in our fundamental biological rest cycles profoundly impact our emotional regulation systems across a whole population. It's biological proof. Emotional mastery, in a very real way, has to start with getting decent sleep. It's non-negotiable.
Biological stability is the bedrock.
Got it. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #5. Using your body to influence your emotions.
Okay, so sleep is foundational. But beyond that, the book emphasizes that our body, our posture, our movement is a direct, immediate mood lever we can pull. So it's not just that our mood affects our body, like feeling down makes you slump.
It works both ways. That's the pivot point here. Yes, feeling defeated makes you slump, but the source's stress that holding that slumped posture actually reinforces and deepens the feeling of defeat physiologically.
Interesting. So changing your physical state can change your mental state.
Directly and often, very quickly. Think about posture. If you deliberately stand or sit upright, pull your shoulders back slightly, maybe even adopt what some call a power pose, taking up a bit more space.
Even if you feel ridiculous doing it.
Even if you feel ridiculous initially, that upright, expansive posture sends physiological signals back to your brain associated with confidence and energy. It can actually influence your hormone levels, like lowering cortisol, even if you're just acting. Movement is a direct intervention.
Like faking it till you make it, but on a biological level.
Kind of, yeah. It's about changing the input signal. This is why many modern fitness trends are shifting focus. It's less purely about aesthetics and more towards holistic well-being, things like yoga, tai chi, or functional fitness. They emphasize feeling capable, energized, balanced, because that physical state directly improves the mental state.
Okay, let's use a U.S. example. Imagine two typical office workers, maybe in a place like Chicago, hitting that mid-afternoon slump after a stressful meeting.
Okay. Worker A stays slumped at their desk, scrolling listlessly, feeling the fatigue and stress deepen. Their posture reinforces the lethargy.
Right. Worker B, feeling the same slump, decides to push back from the desk. They stand up, maybe stretch, and commit to just a 15-minute brisk walk outside, maybe along the Chicago River Walk or just around the block.
What happens to worker B?
That change in physical state, the upright posture, the increased heart rate from walking, the frayed air, the change in visual stimuli, it physiologically interrupts the stress loop. Their body sends different signals to the brain.
Because they come back feeling different.
Likely, yes. More alert, less stuck in that negative feeling, maybe with a bit more focus. They actively use their body to change their emotional state. The book's point is, don't just sit there feeling bad. Use your physicality as a tool. Move your body to change your mind.
It's an immediate reset button you always have access to.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag6. Using your thoughts to influence your emotions. All right, so we've covered sleep and the body. Now we get into the mind itself. The book talks about using our thoughts to influence emotions. This feels like the core of cognitive approaches.
It really is. This is about the mental reframing process. And the key shift, the turning point, according to the sources, is developing the skill to first become aware of your automatic negative thought patterns.
The ones that just run on autopilot in the background.
Exactly. Those habitual ways of thinking that often trigger negative feelings without us even noticing the thought itself. So step one is radical thought awareness, just observing your internal dialogue like a detached scientist without immediate judgment.
Okay, notice the thought. Then what?
Then you challenge it. You separate the thought from objective truth. And this is where the book draws heavily on insights from cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, adapting those clinical tools for practical, everyday use.
CBT. I've heard of that. It's about changing thinking patterns.
Fundamentally, yes. A core technique is identifying and challenging what are called cognitive distortions, common errors in thinking that twist reality and fuel negative emotions.
Can you give an example? The book mentioned catastrophizing.
Catastrophizing is a classic one. Let's take a scenario. Say you're a manager in Atlanta, and you're prepping for a really important presentation to investors. You're feeling anxious.
Understandably.
Then the automatic negative thought pops up. Oh my God, if I miss just one key metric, or if I stammer even once, the whole deal will fall through, my career will be over, maybe my family will end up homeless.
Whoa, that escalated quickly.
That's catastrophizing. It takes one potential negative event and blows it up into the absolute worst-case universe-ending scenario. It's a massive distortion of probability and reality.
So how does the CBT approach, as adapted in the book, help you deal with that thought?
It trains you to pause. First, you notice the thought. Then you label the distortion. Okay, that's catastrophizing. Just naming it takes away some of its power.
Okay.
Then you actively question it with evidence. Ask yourself, is it absolutely true that one stammer means my entire career is over? What's the actual evidence for that? What have been the outcomes of minor stumbles in past presentations? What is the realistic worst-case scenario? Maybe some awkwardness, maybe a follow-up question.
You're basically cross-examining your own negative thought.
Precisely. You're challenging its validity. By doing that, you break the automatic link between the initial trigger, the presentation anxiety, and the resulting paralyzing emotional state, like sheer terror or wanting to hide. You move from being controlled by the thought to simply observing the thought and choosing a more rational interpretation.
It's about regaining control over the narrative in your head.
Exactly. You become the editor, not just the passive recipient of your thoughts.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #7. Using your words to influence your emotions. This feels like a natural follow-on from thoughts. The book talks about the power of our words, both internal self-talk and the words we speak out loud.
Yes, they're deeply connected. If thoughts are the internal script, words are how we often perform or reinforce that script. The turning point here is consciously recognizing language not just as descriptive, but as creative. Our words shape our reality.
Creative how?
The language we habitually use, especially in our self-talk, programs our subconscious and reinforces our identity. If you consistently tell yourself, I'm always so disorganized, or I'm just terrible at public speaking, you're not just describing a state, you're actively cementing that identity. You create an internal reality that makes that behavior more likely.
You talk yourself into being that way.
In a very real sense, yes.
Okay.
Language isn't neutral, it carries emotional weight and directive power. The book urges a conscious swap, moving away from habitual self-criticism and self-limiting language.
Towards more empowering, intentional self-talk.
Exactly. And we see reflections of this principle everywhere in modern discourse, right? Think about the whole culture around positive affirmations.
Yeah, sometimes they feel a bit cheesy, I am abundant, etc.
They can certainly be applied superficially, for sure, but the underlying principle the book taps into is sound. The framing matters immensely. The words you choose to describe yourself, your tasks, your challenges, they dictate your emotional relationship to those things.
Can you give a practical example? The book had one about tasks.
Yes. Let's take a common, maybe slightly tedious but necessary task, say filling out your timesheets or completing some mandatory compliance training online.
Okay.
If your internal monologue is, I should really finish this stupid training, I'm so lazy if I don't get it done today, what emotions does that language generate?
Probably resentment, pressure, maybe guilt, self-criticism. Definitely not motivation.
Right. It feels like an external imposition, something you're being forced to do, coupled with a judgment on your character. Now, what if you consciously shift the language? What if you frame it as, I choose to focus on completing this training module now, because staying current with compliance aligns with my professional goal of being seen as competent and reliable.
That feels different.
How so? What emotions come up with that framing?
More like ownership,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a sense of purpose, even a small. Less resistance, definitely. It connects the annoying tasks to a bigger value.
Precisely. The task itself hasn't changed, but your relationship to it, driven by the language you used, has shifted entirely. You moved from feeling coerced to feeling empowered, from resentment to commitment. The book's message is clear. Your language is the architecture of your internal reality. Build it consciously. Choose your words wisely.
Language as a direct emotional lever. Okay. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #8. How your breathing affects your emotions.
All right, moving from the mental back to the physical, but perhaps the most accessible and immediate tool we possess, according to the book, our breath.
Breathing. It seems so simple, almost too simple sometimes.
It does, doesn't it? But the pivotal moment the book describes is realizing that simple, intentional breathing techniques aren't just calming woo-woo. They are direct physiological interventions that can halt emotional storms and high-stress spirals almost instantly.
How does that work? What's the mechanism?
It's pure physiology, directly linked to your autonomic nervous system, the ANS. The ANS has two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system, SNS.
That's the fight or flight one we talked about earlier, stress response.
Exactly, that's your gas pedal. Then there's the parasympathetic nervous system, PNS, which is often called the rest and digest system. That's your brake pedal. In stressful situations, the SNS takes over, heart rate up, breathing shallow, muscles tense.
Okay, so how does breathing change that?
By consciously controlling your breath, specifically by making your exhale longer than your inhale, you directly stimulate something called the vagus nerve. This is a major nerve connecting your brain to many parts of your body.
And stimulating this vagus nerve does what?
It sends a signal straight to your brain that says, essentially, threat has passed, it's safe now. This signal actively engages the PNS, the brake pedal. Your heart rate slows down, blood pressure drops, muscles relax. You are literally using your breath to tell your body to switch from high alert back to calm.
You're manually overriding the stress response.
You got it. It's the ultimate free always available reset button. The book likely mentions specific techniques like box breathing or the 4-7-8 breath.
Let's take the 4-7-8. How would that work in a real situation?
Okay, imagine someone working in a high-pressure environment, say a financial analyst on Wall Street in New York City. They just got a really difficult, maybe critical phone call right before a major deadline. Anxiety starts spiking.
Yeah, heart-pounding, mind racing.
Instead of letting that spiral take over, they pause. Close their eyes, maybe. They inhale quietly through their nose for a count of 4. They hold their breath gently for a count of 7. And then they exhale slowly and completely through their mouth for a count of 8.
That exhale is quite long.
That's the key. That long, controlled exhale is what maximally stimulates the vagus nerve and engages the PNS. They might repeat this cycle just 3 or 4 times.
And that's enough to make a difference.
Often, yes. It's enough to interrupt the panic cycle, force the physiological state to calm down, and allow them to approach the deadline or the next task with a clearer, less emotionally hijacked mind. It's a direct, powerful tool.
Amazing that something so simple is so physiologically potent. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag9 how your environment affects your emotions. Okay, so we've got sleep, body, thoughts, words, breath. What else influences our emotional state? The book talks about our surroundings, our environment.
Yes, this is something we often underestimate. We think of emotions as purely internal, but our external environment acts as a constant, silent influencer. The shift the book encourages is moving from passively accepting our surroundings to actively, consciously curating our spaces to support positivity and reduce cognitive load.
Cognitive load. You mean like mental clutter?
Exactly. The core idea presented is often quite simple. Physical clutter equals mental clutter. A visually messy, disorganized environment translates directly into increased cognitive load for your brain.
How so? Why does a messy desk make me feel stressed?
Because every item that's out of place, every pile of unsorted papers, every object that doesn't have a designated home represents a tiny, unresolved decision. Your brain subconsciously registers these things, and each one subtly demands a sliver of your attention, constantly chipping away at your mental energy and focus reserves.
It's like having too many browser tabs open in your brain.
That's a perfect analogy. And this becomes profoundly relevant in our modern context, especially with so many people in the U.S. still working in home office hybrid situations since, 2020. The physical boundaries have blurred.
Yeah, work stuff creeping into living spaces.
Right. If your work stress represented by visible piles of files, your laptop always open on the kitchen table, constant notifications pinging in your relaxation zone is physically present during your supposed downtime.
Your brain never really gets the signal to switch off.
It struggles to, absolutely. Your system doesn't fully transition into rest and digest mode if the environmental cues are constantly signaling work or unfinished tasks.
The book must suggest creating separation then.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It talks about the measurable reduction in generalized anxiety people report when they become intentional about this.
Yeah.
Take that kitchen table example if it's been doubling as an office desk all day covered in work debris. The simple act of completely clearing it at the end of the workday, putting the laptop away, maybe putting out a tablecloth or centerpiece, creating a distinct visual shift signals to your brain, work is done. This is now a space for rest, food, connection.
You're redesigning the cues.
You're redesigning the environmental cues to promote mental clarity and establish strong, necessary emotional boundaries between different parts of your life. The takeaway is powerful. Our internal state is constantly mirroring and being influenced by our external environment. Tidy space, tidier mind.
Makes sense. Control what you can control. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag10 how music affects your emotions.
Okay, the last lever in this section, part 2, is an interesting one. Music. How does sound play into emotional regulation?
Music is fascinating because it seems to have this unique ability to bypass a lot of our cognitive, logical filters and directly affect our emotional states. It can instantly lift you up or bring you to tears or profoundly soothe you.
It hits differently than just thinking positive thoughts. It really does. The book likely talks about emotional resonance. Music influences mood partly through physiological effects. It can trigger dopamine release, the pleasure chemical, affect heart rate and breathing patterns, even evoke strong memories tied to emotions.
And in the modern era, with streaming services, we have insane access to music.
Unprecedented access and control. This is where the book positions music not just as entertainment, but as a strategic tool for intentional mood management. We can curate playlists with incredible precision.
How would you use that strategically? Give me an example.
Okay, say you're an engineer or a writer who needs a couple of hours of deep, focused work. You could create a specific focus track playlist.
Hmm.
Maybe it's instrumental electronic music with a certain tempo, or classical baroque, or ambient sounds, whatever works for you, specifically chosen, because it helps you concentrate and blocks out distractions without jarring lyrics pulling your attention.
Using music to create a mental state for productivity.
Exactly. Or, conversely, maybe you're going through a difficult time, perhaps processing grief or dealing with intense frustration. Instead of suppressing those feelings, you could create a playlist that allows you to safely feel and express them.
Music that matches the mood to help process it.
Precisely. It can serve as a container, giving you permission to experience the emotion fully, maybe have a good cry and move through it, rather than letting it get stuck inside. The music facilitates the emotional release.
So the book's message is, don't just let music happen to you, use it.
Use it intentionally. You are, in a sense, the conductor of your own inner state. The book encourages you to consciously choose the soundtrack that best supports the emotional resilience, focus, or processing that you need in that moment. It's another powerful lever at your disposal.
Tune into Sound's power. Got it. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork understanding the basics, identifying the physical and environmental levers. Now, part 3 of the book gets into the really active strategies. How do we consciously change our emotions?
This feels like where the real work begins. Where do we start?
We start by zooming in on the exact process of how an emotion is actually formed in the first place. Understanding the mechanics is key. And the turning point here is internalizing that your emotional response isn't a direct, fixed reaction to an event. It's mediated by something crucial, your interpretation.
Interpretation again. That came up with thoughts.
It's central. The book breaks down the typical emotion creation process into a simple 3-step chain, drawing on basic neuroscience principles.
Okay, what are the steps?
Step 1. A trigger occurs. This could be an external event, someone cuts you off in traffic, or an internal one, a memory pops into your head. Step 2. Your brain instantly, often unconsciously, assigns an interpretation or meaning to that trigger. Step 3. That specific interpretation directly dictates the resulting emotional response.
Trigger, interpretation, emotion. Can you walk through an example?
Sure, let's use a work scenario again. Trigger. Your boss sends you an email with some blunt, maybe critical feedback on a report you submitted.
Okay, that's the trigger. Now, interpretation.
Here's where it diverges. Interpretation A might be, oh no, this is harsh. My boss thinks I'm incompetent. This is proof I'm not good enough for this job. I'm probably going to get fired.
And the resulting emotion from that interpretation.
Intense fear, maybe shame, anxiety, perhaps defensiveness. Now, consider interpretation B of the exact same trigger email. Okay, the feedback is direct, but it's specific. My boss is highlighting areas for improvement so the final report is stronger. This is constructive criticism aimed at getting a better result.
And the emotion for that interpretation.
Might be mild concern, perhaps a focused determination to fix the issues, maybe even a sliver of appreciation for the clarity. It's a completely different emotional outcome.
From the exact same email trigger.
Wow. Exactly. The external event, the email, is neutral until we assign meaning. The crucial insight the book offers is that the only part of that 3-step chain you have direct control over is step 2, the interpretation. You can't always control the triggers, and the emotion automatically follows the interpretation. But you can learn to consciously choose or challenge your interpretation.
That's where the leverage is. Changing the meaning changes the feeling.
That's the core principle for active emotional change.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #12. Changing your interpretation. So if the interpretation is the key leverage point, this next chapter, changing your interpretation, must be all about how to do that right. How do we actually reframe things?
Precisely. This is where we move from being, as the book might frame it, an emotional victim feeling like external events just force us to feel a certain way, to becoming an emotional chooser. Someone who consciously selects the narrative, the interpretation that serves them best.
Choosing the story. How do you do that in the heat of the moment?
It takes practice, obviously, but the core skill is learning to pause and actively seek perspective shifts. When a negative event happens and you feel that initial surge of negative emotion tied to your first automatic interpretation, the work starts by deliberately asking yourself questions.
Like what kind of questions?
Questions like, okay, I feel angry, anxious right now. What's the story I'm telling myself about this event? Is that the only possible interpretation? What else could this mean? Is there any other way to look at this situation? what might be a potential positive outcome or lesson hidden in this challenge.
You're forcing your brain to look for alternatives.
You're forcing it out of its default negative groove. This is closely related to concepts in resilience psychology, sometimes called benefit finding, actively searching for the good or the opportunity within adversity.
The book likely gives examples of this.
It does. A powerful US-centric example often used is how people interpret losing a job, like in a corporate layoff. The initial automatic interpretation is often devastating. I'm a failure, I've been rejected, my future is ruined. And the emotions that follow are despair, shame, hopelessness.
Yeah, that's a common reaction.
But an empowering reframe, a consciously chosen different interpretation might look like this. Okay, this is painful and unexpected, but maybe this layoff is actually a forced opportunity. It's the push I needed to finally start that side business I've been dreaming about. Or this is permission to leave this city I don't really like anymore and find work somewhere that better suits my lifestyle. Or even this frees me up to retrain in a field I'm actually passionate about.
So the external event, the layoff, is identical.
Identical. But the chosen interpretation completely shifts the emotional trajectory. It moves from paralyzing setback and victimhood towards potential opportunity and agency. It doesn't deny the pain, but it changes the narrative about what the pain means for the future.
Emotional mastery, then, is partly about becoming a better storyteller for yourself.
In a huge way, yes. Recognizing that external reality is largely neutral until we overlay it with meaning, and that we have far more power over that meaning-making process than we usually assume.
Choosing the interpretation. Okay. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Hashtag #13, letting go of your emotions. Okay, so we've identified the trigger. We've worked on challenging and changing our interpretation. But sometimes the feeling is still there, right? What does the book say about actually letting go of the emotion itself once it's arisen?
That's a crucial step. Because even with the best reframing, emotions have a certain physiological momentum. The key skill this chapter focuses on is achieving detachment without resorting to denial or suppression. It's about allowing the feeling to move through you and dissipate naturally.
Detachment without denial. How does that work? Isn't detachment a form of suppression?
Not in the way the book frames it. Suppression or denial is like trying to forcefully push a beach ball underwater. It takes immense effort, and the ball inevitably pops back up, often with more force. You're fighting the feeling.
Okay, so what's the alternative?
The alternative, strongly emphasized in the source material, is acceptance. This doesn't mean liking the feeling or agreeing with it. It simply means acknowledging its presence without judgment. Okay, I feel a wave of deep sadness right now, or there is anger present in my body. You acknowledge it, name it, but refuse to become it or get swept away by its story.
You notice it without fueling it.
Exactly. And this is where mindfulness practices become incredibly practical again. The book likely suggests techniques for observing the emotion non-judgmentally.
Like the cloud passing in the sky metaphor.
That's a very common one, yes. Or thinking of the emotion as whether it's raining hard right now, but the rain isn't you, and you know the sun will eventually come out. Another practical technique is to anchor your awareness in the physical sensations of the emotion.
How does focusing on the physical help?
When you feel anger surging, instead of getting lost in the angry thoughts, he shouldn't have done that, it's so unfair, you deliberately shift your focus. Where do I feel this anger in my body? Okay, there's tightness in my jaw, my shoulders are tense, there's heat in my face. By observing the raw physical sensations.
You create distance from the mental story.
Precisely. You shift from being in the turbulent river of angry thoughts to standing on the riverbank, simply observing the water flow by. This non-judgmental observation allows the emotion's energy to complete its natural cycle and dissipate, often much faster than if you were fighting it or feeding it with more angry thoughts.
So you're resisting the urge to jump on the emotional roller coaster and ride it into the ground.
That's a great way to put it. You acknowledge the roller coaster is there. You might even observe its twists and turns. But you don't buy a ticket. You let it pass.
Acceptance and observation is the path to release. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag14. Conditioning your mind to experience more positive emotions.
So far, a lot of the strategies have focused on managing difficult or negative emotions. But the book argues that true emotional mastery is incomplete if it's only about damage control. We also need to actively cultivate positive emotions.
Like building up the positive side of the ledger.
Exactly. This chapter is about conditioning your mind, quite literally retraining your brain for more frequent experiences of optimism, resilience, joy, and contentment. It's not about waiting for good things to happen. It's about building the internal capacity to generate and notice positivity.
How do you condition your mind for that? Sounds like exercise.
It is, in a way. It requires intentional, consistent habit building specifically designed to shift your neural pathways. Remember that threat biases we discussed in Part I, the brain's default tendency to focus on the negative.
Yeah, the old survival mechanism.
Well, this conditioning work is about actively counteracting that ancient wiring. It's about deliberately training your brain to scan for, appreciate, and savor the good. And the single most high-leverage practice the book recommends for this.
Let me guess. Gratitude.
You got it. Gratitude practice. And not just a vague feeling, but a specific, consistent habit. The reason it's so powerful is that expressing gratitude has been shown to measurably increase neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin in the brain, the feel-good chemicals.
So how do you practice it effectively? Just think, I'm grateful.
The book suggests being more structured. A common recommendation is keeping a daily gratitude journal, maybe physical, maybe digital, using an app. The key is consistency, like every night before bed. And specificity.
Specificity, meaning?
Meaning, don't just write, I'm grateful for my family. Write why. I'm grateful my partner listened patiently when I was stressed today. Or, I'm grateful for the specific taste of my coffee this morning. Or, I'm grateful for the unexpected sunshine during my walk. Aim for, say, 3 specific things each day.
And doing that consistently retrains the brain.
Over time, yes. By forcing yourself to consciously scan your day for specific positives, you are literally training your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters information, to start subconsciously noticing more good things throughout the day. You're building the neural infrastructure that makes positive emotion more accessible, more habitual.
So you're not just waiting for happiness to randomly strike.
You're building a system, a mental muscle, that reliably produces and recognizes it more often. It's proactive positivity building.
Conditioning for optimism. I like that. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #TAG15. Changing your emotions by changing your behavior. This chapter title sounds almost backward. Changing your emotions by changing your behavior. Doesn't behavior usually follow emotion? I act because I feel a certain way.
That's our common assumption, yes. But the book makes a crucial point here. The relationship is often bidirectional. Yes, feelings drive actions, but actions can also drive feelings. Sometimes you can literally act your way into a different emotional state.
Act your way out of a bad mood.
The core idea is about linking small, achievable actions directly to the desired feeling. Recognizing that behavior can often precede and generate the emotional state you want, especially when you feel stuck.
Give me an example. How does this break a negative loop?
Okay, let's take someone feeling really low on motivation, maybe mildly depressed, overwhelmed by a big, messy project they need to tackle, say, organizing their entire garage or preparing a huge report.
Yeah, the thought itself is paralyzing. Makes you want to just stay on the couch.
Exactly. The feeling, overwhelm, low energy, leads to the behavior, avoidance, inaction, which then reinforces the negative feeling. See? I'm useless, I can't even start. It's a classic negative behavioral loop.
So how does acting first break that?
The pivot, according to the book, is realizing the power of a ridiculously small, concrete step. Instead of focusing on the overwhelming end goal, I must organize the entire garage, you choose an incredibly tiny, non-threatening first action. Like, I will take just 1 box out to the recycling bin, or I will clear off just the top shelf of that workbench. Or, for the report, I will open the document and write only the title. Something laughably small.
Why does that work? It seems insignificant.
Because completing even that tiny action does 2 things. 1, it breaks the pattern of inaction. 2, it provides a small but measurable hit of competence and control. You get a little neurochemical reward. Hey, I did something. This tiny positive feeling can be just enough to disrupt the negative emotional spiral.
It creates a little momentum.
Exactly. It creates momentum. That one small action makes the next small action feel slightly less impossible. This is the principle behind popular productivity hacks like the 2-minute rule. If a task takes less than 2 minutes, do it immediately. They work because they use action to generate positive feeling and overcome the initial emotional resistance.
So when you feel stuck, don't wait for motivation. Just do something, anything, small.
Do the smallest possible thing related to the task. Let the action generate the feeling instead of waiting for the feeling to generate the action. It's a powerful way to regain agency when emotions have you pinned down.
Behavior as the engine for emotion. Interesting. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #TAG16. Changing your emotions by changing your environment. Redesign.
We touched on environment earlier, talking about clutter and boundaries. This chapter seems to revisit it, but with a focus on active redesign for emotional health. What's the angle here?
Yeah, it builds on the earlier idea. If part two is about recognizing the environment's influence, this part is about taking deliberate surgical action to change it, specifically focusing on identifying and removing things in your surroundings that consistently trigger negative emotions. So it's about playing defense against environmental triggers.
That's a good way to think about it. Proactively identifying and neutralizing the cues in your space that reliably set off an unwanted emotional reaction.
Can you give an example of an environmental trigger like that?
Sure, maybe every time you hear a specific notification sound on your phone, perhaps the one associated with work emails or a particular demanding client, you immediately feel a spike of anxiety or resentment, even if it's evening or the weekend.
Okay, yeah, that happens. So redesigning means.
Redesigning your environment in this case could mean changing that specific notification sound to something neutral, or silencing it altogether during non-work hours. Or it could mean physically removing the phone from your line of sight, putting it in a drawer in another room when you want to relax so the visual cue is gone too.
You're altering the sensory input that triggers the negative feeling.
Precisely. Another example. If seeing a pile of unpaid bills on the counter consistently triggers feelings of stress and overwhelm every time you walk past.
Then redesigning means finding a specific folder or drawer for them, keeping them out of sight until you intentionally decide to deal with them.
Exactly. You're not ignoring the bills, but you're controlling when and how you engage with that potential stressor by managing its presence in your environment. You're curating your space to minimize unsolicited negative pings.
This sounds connected to ideas like minimalism, too.
Very much so. The book likely connects this to principles of modern minimalism or essentialism. The value isn't just aesthetic cleanliness, it's that having fewer possessions, less visual clutter, and more intentionally designed spaces directly translates to less cognitive load, fewer decisions to make, and therefore reduced background levels of emotional stress and decision fatigue.
So an intentional environment is a foundation for intentional emotional regulation.
It's a prerequisite, or at least a powerful support. By consciously designing your surroundings to remove negative triggers and maybe even introduce positive cues, like having nature visible or pleasant lighting, you create a space that actively supports your emotional well-being rather than subtly undermining it.
Taking control of the external to help manage the internal. Makes sense. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #, 17. Short-term and long-term solutions to deal with negative emotions. All right, this final strategy chapter in part 3 seems really practical. It talks about having both short-term and long-term solutions for negative emotions. Why the distinction?
This distinction is vital because dealing with negative emotions isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. True emotional mastery, according to the book, requires having a dual toolkit. You need quick fixes for immediate relief and deeper strategies for sustainable, long-lasting change.
So it's like having first aid and ongoing physical therapy.
That's an excellent analogy. Short-term solutions are your emotional first aid kit. They're designed to stabilize the system right now, to halt an emotional storm in its tracks, prevent escalation, and give you breathing room.
What kind of techniques fall into this short-term category?
These are many of the things we've already discussed that offer immediate physiological or cognitive shifts. Deploying that 4-7-8 breathing technique when anxiety spikes, taking a quick 5-minute walk outside when feeling overwhelmed, putting on a specific piece of soothing music, maybe splashing cold water on your face, doing a quick reality check on a catastrophic thought. They treat the immediate symptom.
Okay, quick relief. So what are the long-term solutions for?
Long-term solutions are the physical therapy in your analogy. They address the underlying patterns, beliefs, or conditions that generate the negative emotions frequently in the first place. This is the deeper work required for sustained change and resilience.
Examples of long-term strategies.
This could include things like consistent, ongoing mindfulness meditation to change your baseline relationship with thoughts, engaging in cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, with a professional to identify and restructure core negative beliefs learned in childhood, working through and forgiving past hurts or resentments that keep fueling bitterness, consistently practicing gratitude to rewire for positivity, making significant lifestyle changes related to sleep, diet, or exercise, addressing problematic relationship dynamics.
So these are the things that change the fundamental landscape, not just manage the current weather.
Exactly. And the book heavily emphasizes the importance of sustainability here. You absolutely need both types of solutions.
Why? What happens if you only use one type?
If you only rely on short-term fixes, it's like constantly bailing water out of a leaky boat without ever patching the hole. You're always reacting, always putting out fires, never addressing the root cause. You'll likely feel exhausted and like you're not making real progress.
Okay, and if you only focus on long-term stuff?
Then you might suffer unnecessarily in the immediate moments of intense emotional distress. You might know intellectually that you need to change core beliefs, but without short-term tools to manage panic or rage right now, you might get overwhelmed and give up on the long-term work altogether.
So the true master knows which tool to pull out when. The quick fix for the crisis and the consistent practice for the foundation.
Precisely. It's about having that stratified approach, understanding the difference, and skillfully deploying both short-term stabilization techniques and long-term preventative strategies. That combination leads to robust, sustainable emotional well-being.
A comprehensive toolkit. Got it. Like, subscribe, and share for more updates. Okay, part 4. We've learned what emotions are, what influences them, and strategies to change them. Now the book shifts to using emotions for growth. How can feelings actually guide us?
This is a really empowering shift in perspective. Instead of seeing emotions, especially uncomfortable ones, purely as problems to be managed or eliminated, this section reframes them as sophisticated internal compasses. They're sources of valuable information, capable of guiding you towards more intuitive, values-aligned decisions and actions.
Emotions as guides, not just nuisances.
Exactly. The core idea is that every emotion carries a message, often related to your needs, values, or the alignment between your life and your true self. The skill is learning to accurately interpret these signals rather than just reacting to the surface feeling.
Can you give some examples of interpreting signals? What might anxiety mean besides just, I feel anxious?
Well, anxiety, especially before a performance or important event, might not just be a signal to run away. It could be a signal that says, hey, this is important to you and perhaps more preparation is needed. It's prompting you to take constructive action.
Okay, what about other feelings, like boredom?
Persistent, deep boredom in a job or situation might be a signal that your need for growth, challenge, or intellectual stimulation isn't being met. It's nudging you to seek novelty or development.
And negative relational feelings, like resentment.
Resentment is a powerful signal. It almost always indicates that a personal boundary has been crossed or violated, perhaps repeatedly, and hasn't been addressed. It's signaling a need for clearer communication, firmer boundaries, or maybe even a change in the relationship dynamic. Feeling guilty might signal you've acted against your own values.
So learning to read the underlying message.
Yes. And the book argues that developing self-trust really hinges on learning to honor these internal signals. Think about making big life decisions, choosing a career path, a partner, where to live. Logically, something might look perfect on paper.
But you get that nagging feeling, that sense of dread or misalignment in your gut.
Exactly. That feeling, that emotional signal, is often profound wisdom from your deeper self, indicating that despite the external logic, something is fundamentally misaligned with your core values, needs, or life purpose.
And ignoring that feeling leads to problems down the road.
Often leads to cognitive dissonance, dissatisfaction, burnout. Honoring that intuitive emotional guidance, even when it contradicts logic, frequently leads to choices that support your long-term well-being and authentic self. It's about trusting your internal compass.
Viewing emotions as valuable data for life navigation. That's a big shift. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag19.4. Recording your emotions.
So if emotions are valuable signals, how do we get better at reading them accurately? The book strongly advocates for a specific practice here: systematically recording your emotions. Journaling.
Journaling again. It came up with gratitude, now for tracking emotions.
Yeah.
Why is writing it down so important?
Because our memory of emotions and their context is often unreliable and biased. We might feel generally stressed, but struggle to pinpoint why or when it peaks. Structured emotional recording provides objective data over time, revealing critical patterns, triggers, and responses that are essential for personal growth.
So it's not just venting, I felt bad today. It's more analytical.
Ideally, yes. The goal isn't just catharsis, though that can be a benefit. It's about tracking the entire emotional chain we discussed earlier. For each significant emotional episode, you'd try to note, what was the specific trigger? The event, thought, or situation? What was my immediate interpretation or the story I told myself about it? What emotions did I feel and how intense were they? And how did I respond behaviorally? What did I do or say?
That sounds pretty detailed. Does it have to be done every day?
Consistency is key to seeing patterns, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming. Maybe focus on 1 or 2 significant emotional events per day, or track for a specific period when you're trying to understand a particular recurring feeling, like anxiety or anger.
Yeah.
The key is capturing those data points.
And what do you gain from collecting all this data?
Over weeks or months, clear patterns emerge that you simply wouldn't notice otherwise. You might realize, looking back at your log, that 90% of your intense frustration is triggered specifically by interactions with one particular colleague, or that your anxiety consistently spikes after poor sleep or consuming too much news. Or you might see that a certain coping mechanism you use actually makes things worse long term.
It makes the invisible connections visible.
Exactly. And this is where modern digital tools can be quite helpful, as the book might suggest. There are mood tracking apps that allow you to log emotions, triggers, intensity, and coping strategies quickly. Some even help you visualize the data in charts and graphs.
Turning fuzzy feelings into concrete data points you can analyze.
Precisely. It transforms what felt like an overwhelming, random mess of emotions into clearer, measurable trends. And once you see the patterns, this consistently leads to that, you gain specific insights you can use to strategize and make concrete behavioral or environmental changes to address the root causes. It's self-awareness powered by data.
Emotional intelligence through self-observation. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #20, not being good enough. Okay, let's dive into some specific common emotional challenges the book addresses, using these mastery principles. First up, that pervasive nagging feeling of not being good enough. This one feels huge for a lot of people.
It's incredibly common, almost epidemic in some ways, fueled by comparison culture and internal pressures. Emotional mastery requires confronting this feeling directly and actively shifting focus towards building genuine internal self-worth, independent of external achievements or validation.
How do you confront a feeling that feels so true sometimes?
The core strategy is to recognize it as a feeling and often a limiting belief, not an objective fact. Then you need to actively challenge and dismantle those underlying beliefs. These beliefs, I'm inherently flawed, I'll never measure up, I'm an imposter, are often deep-seated.
Where do they come from usually?
They might be formed in childhood based on early experiences, perhaps critical parenting or early failures that got overgeneralized. Or they can develop later through societal pressures. Regardless of origin, they tend to create a negative, self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you're not good enough, you might not take risks. You might self-sabotage, confirming the belief.
So how do you dismantle them?
It involves becoming aware of the specific thoughts that fuel the feeling, I'm such an idiot for making that mistake. Then challenging those thoughts with evidence. Okay, I made a mistake. Does one mistake make me an idiot? What are the things I do well? What if I learn from this? You countered the generalization with specific contrary evidence.
Replacing the negative self-talk.
Actively replacing it, yes. And consciously replacing the limiting belief with more realistic, compassionate, and evidence-based affirmations of your competence, your inherent value as a person, separate from your performance, and your capacity for growth. The language shift here is absolutely crucial.
Could you give an example of that language shift?
It's the difference between the internal declaration, I am a failure because I didn't get that promotion, versus a more accurate and compassionate statement like, I feel disappointed I didn't get that promotion. It doesn't mean I am a failure as a person. Let me analyze what skills I could develop or what factors were involved and focus on the next opportunity.
You're separating the specific event or outcome from your fundamental identity and worth.
Precisely. You acknowledge the setback or the feeling without letting it define your entire being. You maintain the truth of your inherent self-worth even amidst imperfection or failure. It's about cultivating self-compassion alongside self-awareness.
Challenging that inner critic with facts and kindness. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag21. Being defensive.
All right, next common challenge, defensiveness. That instant urge to protect yourself, justify your actions, or push back when you feel criticized or challenged.
The ego shield's full effect, right?
Exactly. Defensiveness is a classic manifestation of the ego trying to protect its fragile identity structure. Emotional mastery, as the book presents it, demands learning to soften these internal guards, recognizing that true strength often lies in openness and vulnerability, not in building higher walls.
Easier said than done, especially when criticism feels unfair.
Oh, absolutely. The central strategy isn't about never feeling defensive, but about reducing the knee-jerk, automatic, reactive nature of the response. It's about creating a pause between the perceived criticism and your reaction.
How do you create that pause?
Awareness is the first step. Noticing the physical sensations of defensiveness rising, maybe tightness in the chest, heat in the face, urge to interrupt. Then, instead of instantly reacting from that triggered state, you make a conscious choice to respond differently. Often, the best choice is curiosity.
Curiosity instead of justification.
Yes. When someone offers feedback, even if it feels critical or off base, the ego's immediate reaction is often, "That's not true, let me tell you why you're wrong," or "It wasn't my fault because." This shuts down communication.
So what does a curiosity-based response look like?
The book likely provides simple communication tips. Instead of launching into your defense, you might try taking a breath and asking a genuine open-ended question, something like, "Okay, that's an interesting perspective. Can you tell me more about what specifically led you to that observation? Or help me understand your concern better? Or even just, let me think about that for a moment."
That sounds disarming, both for them and for yourself.
It is. It does several things. It buys you time to regulate your own initial emotional reaction. It signals to the other person that you're actually listening, not just preparing your rebuttal. And, crucially, it shifts the dynamic immediately.
How does it shift the dynamic?
It moves from a potential conflict, a contest of who's right and who's wrong, towards a collaborative effort to understand a perspective or solve a problem. You might still disagree with the feedback ultimately, but by responding with openness first, you preserve the relationship and often gain valuable information, even if the delivery was poor.
So it's about choosing dialogue over debate, even when you feel attacked.
Choosing understanding over immediate self-protection. It takes practice, but it's a hallmark of emotional maturity, the ability to receive feedback without crumbling or attacking back.
Lowering the shield, choosing curiosity. Okay. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Hashtag TED22. Stress and worry. Let's tackle the big one. General stress and worry. That free-floating anxiety about the future, the constant what-ifs, how does emotional mastery help tame that?
Stress and worry are almost always rooted in the mind projecting itself into the future, dwelling on potential negative outcomes that haven't happened yet and may never happen. So the core strategy for mastery here is learning to consistently pivot the mind out of that future projection and back into the stability of the present moment.
Anchoring in the now. How do you do that when your mind is racing with worries?
The book emphasizes practical grounding techniques. These are simple exercises designed to grab your mind's attention and anchor it firmly in your immediate sensory experience, interrupting the anxious thought loop.
What kind of techniques?
Anything that pulls you out of your head and into your body or surroundings. The popular 5-4-3-2-1 technique is a great example. You pause, take a breath, and intentionally name 5 things you can see right now, 4 things you can physically feel, your feet on the floor, the chair supporting you, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Or just the sense of your tongue in your mouth.
Why does naming sensory details work?
Because it forces your attention away from the abstract, future-oriented worries and onto concrete, present-moment reality. You can't simultaneously be lost in a what-if spiral and fully focused on the texture of your sleeve or the sound of the air conditioning. It acts as a rapid interrupt for the anxious mind. Other grounding techniques include focusing intently on your breath, as we discussed, slowly sipping water and noticing the sensation, or pressing your feet firmly into the ground.
Quick ways to get out of your head and into your senses.
Exactly. And this skill is especially vital today, isn't it? The book likely touches on how modern life, particularly constant media consumption and the 24/7 news cycle about global crises or political turmoil, massively amplifies generalized anxiety across the population.
Yeah, it feels like there's always something new to worry about being fed to us.
There is. And that's why emotional mastery in 2025 also involves consciously managing your information intake, establishing intentional, firm boundaries around how much news you consume, which sources you trust, and when you engage with it, it's no longer just a nice to have. The book would argue it's a prerequisite for maintaining a stable emotional landscape. You have to actively filter the external chaos to protect your internal calm.
So grounding techniques for the moment and boundaries for the input.
A powerful combination for taming stress and worry, bringing your focus back to the present, and managing the external triggers that constantly try to pull you into future anxieties.
Mastering the present to manage fears of the future. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Hashtag 23. Caring what people think of you.
This is another huge one, deeply tied to the ego and social dynamics. The fear of judgment, constantly worrying about what other people think of you. How do we find freedom from that?
The book frames this as a quest for emotional independence. The turning point is fundamentally shifting your primary source of validation from external sources, likes, compliments, approval from others, to deep, stable, internal validation, building your sense of worth from the inside out.
Easier said than done in a world obsessed with appearances and social media.
Incredibly difficult. But the core truth the book likely emphasizes is this. Other people's opinions of you are almost always projections. They're filtered through their internal world, their own beliefs, biases, moods, needs, insecurities, and past experiences. Their judgment rarely reflects an objective reality about you.
So worrying about their opinion is like worrying about the weather forecast in someone else's mind.
That's a fantastic way to put it. You can't control it. And it's often not even about you. The book argues your primary responsibility is to your own character, your own values, your own integrity, not to managing the fleeting subjective perceptions others might have of you.
How do you cultivate that internal validation?
It involves consciously defining your own values and metrics for success and self-worth. What truly matters to you? What kind of person do you want to be? You start measuring yourself against that internal standard, rather than the assumed or expressed standards of others. It also involves practicing self-compassion, accepting your imperfections without needing external reassurance.
And this ties back to social media again, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Social media platforms, by their very design, often amplify this fear of judgment. Every post feels like a performance, subject to immediate public review. Likes, comments, shares become external validation metrics. It trains us to seek approval constantly.
So the antidote is...
The antidote, according to the source material, is focusing fiercely on authentic self-expression rather than curated performance. Sharing or acting based on your genuine interests and values, regardless of the potential reception, and consciously reminding yourself that your worth isn't tied to online metrics. Building that internal measure of success, that sense of I'm okay regardless of external approval, is key.
It's about reclaiming your own opinion as the one that matters most.
Exactly. Whose approval are you truly seeking? Ideally, it should be your own, based on living in alignment with your values. That's the foundation of emotional independence from judgment.
A lifelong practice, I imagine.
Definitely. But a liberating one. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag 24.
Resentment. Okay, let's talk about resentment. That bitter, simmering feeling you hold on to when you feel wronged or treated unfairly. It feels heavy. How does the book approach this? Resentment is described as a particularly toxic emotion because it involves reliving past hurts over and over again, keeping the wound fresh. The book frames healing grudges not just as a nice thing to do, but as essential for your own emotional liberation. The turning point is often realizing that holding on to resentment hurts you far more than it hurts the person you resent.
It's like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies.
That's the classic analogy, and it's accurate. The book stresses that releasing resentment, often through a process of forgiveness, is primarily an act of self-care. You're freeing yourself from the heavy anchor of the past.
How do you process these past hurts? Isn't forgiveness sometimes really hard, or it feels like letting the other person off the hook?
It can be incredibly difficult, and the book likely clarifies that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean forgetting what happened, condoning the behavior, or even reconciling with the person. It's primarily an internal shift. It's about actively choosing to release the consuming anger, bitterness, and desire for retribution for your own sake.
So it's about letting go of the emotional charge.
Yeah, exactly. It involves acknowledging the pain, allowing yourself to feel the anger or sadness associated with the hurt, but then making a conscious decision to stop letting that past event control your present emotional state. This might involve reframing the event, finding compassion, perhaps for the other person's limitations or for your past self, or simply deciding the emotional cost of holding the grudge is too high.
And what happens if you don't process it? If the resentment just festers?
The book highlights how corrosive unaddressed resentment is, particularly in ongoing relationships. It acts like a slow poison, undermining trust, intimacy, and open communication. You can't be fully present with someone if a significant chunk of your emotional energy is tied up in replaying old grievances or keeping score. It blocks connection.
So letting go is necessary for healthy relationships now, not just peace about the past.
Absolutely. Releasing resentment frees up that emotional energy, allowing you to engage more fully and positively in your current life and relationships. It's a crucial step towards emotional freedom, cutting the chains to past hurts.
Forgiveness as liberation. Okay, like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag 25, jealousy.
All right, let's tackle jealousy's close cousin, envy. That feeling when someone else has something, success, possessions, qualities that you want, it can be really destructive. How does the book suggest transforming this?
The core strategy here is a powerful reframe. Instead of letting envy fester into bitterness or self-pity, they have that and I don't, therefore I am lacking. Emotional mastery involves learning to transform that pang of envy into constructive, motivating energy for your own life.
Turning poison into fuel. How?
The key is to reframe the comparison itself. When you feel envious of someone's achievement or situation, instead of seeing it as proof of your deficit, the book encourages you to view it as an inspiration source or a signpost.
A signpost pointing where? Pointing towards something you genuinely desire or value. The fact that you feel envious indicates that the other person has achieved something that resonates with your own aspirations. Their success proves that the goal is actually possible. It provides a clue about what you might want to aim for.
So instead of, it's unfair they have that, it's okay, that's possible, and it's something I value. What can I learn?
Exactly. You shift from passive, destructive, emotional reaction, I feel bad because they have X, to active, motivating inquiry. What specific steps did they take to achieve X? What skills did they master? What obstacles did they overcome? How can I apply those lessons to my own path towards a similar goal that I value?
You're using their success as a roadmap, not as a mirror reflecting your own perceived flaws.
Precisely. You analyze it for clues, for strategy, for motivation. If you envy a colleague's recent promotion and the recognition they received,
Instead of just stewing about it.
you could analyze what projects did they excel at? How did they build relationships? Did they seek out specific training or mentorship? You turn the uncomfortable feeling of envy into a research project for your own growth.
Like completely changes the energy of the emotion.
It really does. It channels that potent emotional energy away from self-destruction and towards constructive action aligned with your own goals. It's about recognizing envy not as a judgment on your worth, but as potentially valuable data about your desires.
Transforming comparison into inspiration. That's powerful. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Hashtag tag26. Depression. The book also addresses depression, or at least sustained emotional lows. This is obviously a complex topic, often requiring professional help. How does the emotional mastery framework approach navigating these really difficult periods?
You're right to highlight the complexity and the potential need for professional support, which the book likely acknowledges implicitly or explicitly. Within the framework of emotional mastery for managing daily life, the focus when navigating significant lows is on consistent, supportive, and compassionate action, even and especially when the internal drive to act is minimal or absent.
Action even when you feel no motivation. That sounds incredibly hard.
It is incredibly hard. That's why the emphasis is on small, manageable, supportive steps, focusing on maintaining a basic level of balance in key areas known to impact mood, activity, rest, and connection.
What kind of supportive actions are highlighted?
When energy levels plummet during low periods, the natural tendency is often towards withdrawal, isolation, and inactivity, which unfortunately tends to deepen the depression. So the book likely emphasizes non-negotiable, gentle counteractions. Things like prioritizing sleep hygiene as much as possible, even if sleep is difficult. Maintaining some minimal level of physical activity, even just a short walk outside, can make a difference physiologically. And crucially, forcing some level of social connection.
Forcing connection, even when you just want to be alone.
Yes, because isolation is known to exacerbate depressive feelings. This doesn't mean forcing yourself into loud parties. It might mean just calling one friend for a few minutes, having a brief chat with a neighbor, or agreeing to a quiet coffee with a supportive family member. Resisting the powerful urge to completely withdraw is key. It's about maintaining threads of connection, however small.
It's like behavioral activation, gently pushing against the inertia.
Exactly. It's also about managing self-talk during these periods, countering the harsh inner critic that often accompanies depression with deliberate self-compassion. Recognizing the low mood as a state, not a definition of self. And again, this brings us back to the crucial mental health context.
Right. These strategies are for managing fluctuations, but not necessarily a cure for clinical depression.
Precisely. The emotional mastery tools provide powerful support for daily regulation and coping with difficult moods. But the book's framework exists alongside and does not replace the need to recognize signs of severe or persistent depression and to utilize appropriate external mental health resources, therapy, medication if needed, support groups. Part of mastery is knowing the limits of self-management and knowing when to seek professional help.
Self-awareness includes knowing when you need more support. Got it. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. Hashtag tag27 for your discomfort.
Okay, let's talk about fear and general discomfort. Not necessarily crippling anxiety, but that feeling of unease or apprehension we get when facing something new, challenging, or outside our usual routine. How should we relate to that?
The book offers a really counterintuitive but powerful perspective here. Instead of seeing fear and discomfort purely as signals to retreat or avoid, emotional mastery involves learning to reinterpret them very often as signals of potential growth. Discomfort is frequently the price of entry for expanding your capabilities or experiences.
So, feeling uncomfortable isn't necessarily bad.
Not at all. In fact, if you never feel uncomfortable, it probably means you're staying firmly within your comfort zone, and therefore you're likely not growing or learning much. The book encourages actively embracing or at least tolerating a certain amount of unease as a necessary part of personal expansion.
How do you build that tolerance? Discomfort feels, well, uncomfortable.
You build it through gradual, intentional exposure. It's about systematically stepping outside your comfort zone in small, manageable ways. Each time you face a situation that evokes mild fear or discomfort, and you stay with it, maybe using some of the breathing or reframing techniques we discussed, you actually strengthen your capacity to handle it.
Like building a muscle.
Exactly like building a muscle. Your discomfort tolerance muscle gets stronger with practice. The book might use examples like intentionally taking on a task you find slightly intimidating, maybe volunteering to give a short presentation at work if public speaking makes you nervous, or striking up a brief conversation with a stranger if social anxiety is an issue, or trying a new skill you know you won't be good at initially.
So it's not about eliminating the fear, but changing your relationship to it.
Precisely. It's about recognizing the fear, acknowledging it. Okay, I feel nervous right now, but choosing to act anyway, based on your values or goals. You learn that the fear itself isn't catastrophic, that you can function even while feeling it.
And each time you do that.
Each exposure tends to diminish the power of the fear response over time. The situation becomes less intimidating. You build what some call psychological anti-fragility. You don't just tolerate stress, you can actually get stronger because of it by leaning into manageable challenges.
So the message is, don't just seek comfort, seek growth, even if it feels uncomfortable initially.
Lean into the edge of your comfort zone. That's where the expansion happens. Discomfort is often just a signpost pointing towards growth.
Reinterpreting fear as a growth signal. Powerful.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag 28.
Procrastination. Procrastination. The bane of so many people's existence. We often just label it as laziness, right? But the book probably has a different take.
It definitely does. The emotional mastery perspective reframes procrastination not primarily as a time management problem or a character flaw like laziness, but fundamentally as an emotional regulation problem. We delay tasks not because we're inherently lazy, but usually because the task itself, or the potential outcomes associated with it, evokes uncomfortable emotions we want to avoid. Emotions like what? What are we avoiding?
It could be a range of things. The book likely encourages roots analysis, digging beneath the surface behavior of delay. Often, procrastination is driven by underlying fears. Fear of failure. If I start this big project, I might mess it up and that will feel awful. Fear of judgment. If I put my work out there, people might criticize it. Fear of success, paradoxically. If I succeed, expectations will be higher and I'll have more responsibility. Or sometimes just boredom, frustration, or resentment associated with the task itself.
So we delay the task to avoid the unpleasant feeling.
Exactly. The procrastination itself, scrolling social media, cleaning the house, doing anything else, provides temporary relief from that anticipated negative emotion. It's a short-term mood repair strategy, but one with negative long-term consequences.
So if it's an emotional issue, how do the mastery strategies help break the cycle?
By addressing the emotion directly, rather than just focusing on willpower or time management hacks, those can help too. First, identify the specific feeling you're avoiding. Is it anxiety, overwhelm, boredom, fear of judgment? Naming it is key.
Okay, identify the feeling. Then what?
Then, deploy some of the strategies we've discussed. Can you reframe the task to make it feel less threatening? Can you break it down into such a tiny first step, like we talked about with behavior change, that the emotional barrier to starting is almost zero? Can you use breathing techniques to calm the anxiety before you begin? Can you change your environment to make starting easier?
Using the emotional toolkit to lower the barrier to entry.
Precisely. You're managing the feeling that's blocking the action. The book might also provide context on simple momentum starters, focusing just on starting for 5 or 10 minutes, giving yourself permission to do an imperfect first draft, or pairing the unpleasant task with something enjoyable.
So it's less about forcing yourself through willpower
Hmm?
and more about skillfully managing the emotional resistance.
That's the core idea. Understand the emotional root of the delay, address that feeling using your mastery tools, and make it easier to just begin. Often, once you start, the negative feelings diminish anyway. Getting over that initial emotional hurdle is the biggest challenge.
Procrastination is an emotion problem, not a lazy problem. That's a helpful reframe. Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag29, lack of motivation.
And finally, rounding out these common challenges. Lack of motivation, that feeling of meh, the absence of drive or enthusiasm, even for things we supposedly want to do. How does the book tackle this?
Similar to procrastination, the book likely approaches low motivation not just as a state to be passively endured, but as a signal that something deeper might be disconnected. Often, a lack of motivation stems from a perceived lack of meaning or purpose connected to the task or goal. Sustainable fuel for action, the book argues, comes from a clear sense of why.
So, if I'm not motivated, it might be because I don't see the point.
Or you've lost sight of the point, yes. The key strategy here is intentionally, consciously connecting your daily tasks, even the tedious ones, back to your larger, meaningful goals or core values. Reigniting drive by reminding yourself of the ultimate purpose.
How does that work practically? If I'm unmotivated to, say, exercise, well, focusing just on the immediate discomfort, getting sweaty, feeling tired, won't help. But if you consciously connect the act of exercising back to a larger value or goal that does motivate you, maybe I value my long-term health so I can be active with my kids, or feeling strong and capable improves my overall confidence, or this is part of my goal to complete a marathon, that higher purpose can provide the necessary fuel to overcome the short-term lack of enthusiasm. You're linking the what to the why.
Exactly. You need to keep the why visible and salient. The book might also utilize the context of techniques like visioning or future self exercises to maintain that long-term drive.
How do those help with motivation?
By vividly imagining the person you are striving to become, maybe the more confident, healthier, more accomplished future version of yourself, you create a compelling internal pull towards that future state. This makes the necessary, sometimes uncomfortable actions you need to take today feel more worthwhile and meaningful. You're not just pushing through tasks, you're actively moving towards a desired identity.
So motivation isn't just something you have or don't have, it's something you cultivate by connecting to purpose and vision.
Yes, it's less about waiting for inspiration to strike and more about actively generating and sustaining it by keeping your why firmly in mind. Finding meaning is the most reliable source of fuel.
Reigniting drive by turning purpose into sustainable fuel. Makes sense.
Like, subscribe, and share for more update. #tag conclusion and outro. Wow. That was quite a journey through the layers of emotional mastery. We really covered a lot of ground, mapping out the core ideas from the source material.
We really did. We started with part 1, understanding the fundamentals that ancient survival wiring, the ego shield, the true nature of emotions as signals.
Right. Then part 2 explored all those tangible levers we can pull: sleep, our body, thoughts, words, breath, environment, even music. So many ways to influence how we feel.
Then part 3 got really practical with the active change strategies, understanding how emotions form, the power of changing our interpretations, techniques for letting go, conditioning positivity, and using behavior and environment redesign. Plus, knowing when to use short-term versus long-term solutions.
And finally, part 4 shifted to application and growth, using emotions as guides, the power of recording them, and tackling specific challenges like inadequacy, defensiveness, worry, resentment, and procrastination by applying these mastery principles.
It paints a comprehensive picture, and I think the crucial takeaway, the final turning point the book emphasizes, is that emotional mastery isn't some final destination you arrive at.
It's not like you graduate and you're mastered.
Exactly. It's an ongoing process, a lifelong commitment, really, to cultivating awareness, applying these tools, and making consistent choices. It's about building and maintaining habits that support sustained positivity, resilience, and personal evolution. You don't eliminate challenging emotions, you just get much, much better at navigating them skillfully and using them constructively.
So for you, the listener, the real value of this whole deep dive, everything we've discussed, it lies entirely in putting something into practice.
Absolutely. Knowledge isn't power until it's applied. Don't feel overwhelmed by all 29 chapters or concepts we touched on. The invitation from the book, and from us, is simple. Choose one thing.
Just one.
Just one concept or tool that resonated with you today. Maybe it's trying the 4-7-8 breath the next time you feel stressed. Maybe it's consciously challenging your interpretation the next time you get critical feedback. Maybe it's starting a simple gratitude log tonight. Pick one small thing.
And commit to integrating that one tool, starting immediately. Make that small, consistent habit real today.
That's where the change begins. And that leads us to a final, provocative thought for you to carry forward, something to mull over.
Okay, leave us with something to think about.
Consider this. If your greatest life decision, maybe a career change, a relationship commitment, a major personal goal was made from a place of true emotional mastery, guided by clarity, wisdom, and courage, rather than by fear, reactivity, or insecurity, what might that decision look like? And, more importantly, what simple, consistent habit, based on everything we've discussed, can you start today to make that possibility of acting from mastery more real tomorrow?
Powerful questions to end on. Thank you so much for navigating this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure. Lots to think about and practice.
Indeed. We'll catch you on the next one.